East of the Sun and West of the Moon. Part 2. So when she had rubbed the sleep out of her eyes, and wept till she was tired, she set out on her way, and walked many, many days, till she came to a lofty crag. Under it sat an old hag, and played with a gold apple which she tossed about. Her the lassie asked if she knew the way to the prince, who lived with his stepmother in the castle, that lay east of the sun and west of the moon, and who was to marry the princess with a nose 3 ells long.
How did you come to know about him?
Asked the old hag.
But maybe you are the lassie who ought to have had him.
Yes, she was.
So, it's you, is it?
Said the old hag.
Well, all I know about him is that he lives in the castle that lies east of the sun and west of the moon. And thither you'll come, late or never, but still you may have the loan of my horse, and on him you can ride to my next neighbor. Maybe she'll be able to tell you, and when you get there, just give the horse a switch under the left ear, and beg him to be off home, and, stay, this gold apple you may take with you.
So she got upon the horse, and rode a long, long time, till she came to another crag, under which sat another old hag, with a gold carding comb. Her the lassie asked if she knew the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. And she answered, like the first old hag, that she knew nothing about it, except it was east of the sun and west of the moon.
And thither you'll come, late or never, but you shall have the loan of my horse to my next neighbor, maybe she'll tell you all about it. And when you get there, just switch the horse under the left ear, and beg him to be off home.
And this old hag gave her the golden carding comb, it might be she'd find some use for it, she said. So the lassie got up on the horse, and rode a far, far way, and a weary time, and so at last she came to another great crag, under which sat another old hag, spinning with a golden spinning wheel. Her too, she asked if she knew the way to the prince, and where the castle was that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. So it was the same thing over again.
Maybe it's you who ought to have had the prince.
Said the old hag. Yes, it was. But she too didn't know the way a bit better than the other two.
East of the sun and west of the moon it was.
She knew. That was all.
And thither you'll come, late or never, but I'll lend you my horse. And then I think you'd best ride to the east wind and ask him, maybe he knows those parts, and can blow you thither. But when you get to him, you need only give the horse a switch under the left ear, and he'll trot home of himself.
And so too, she gave her the gold spinning wheel.
Maybe you'll find a use for it,
said the old hag. Then on she rode many, many days, a weary time, before she got to the east wind's house, but at last she did reach it. And then she asked the east wind if he could tell her the way to the prince who dwelt east of the sun and west of the moon. Yes, the east wind had often heard tell of it, the prince and the castle. But he couldn't tell the way, for he had never blown so far.
But, if you will, I'll go with you to my brother the west wind, maybe he knows, for he's much stronger. So, if you will just get on my back, I'll carry you thither.
Yes, she got on his back, and I should just think they went briskly along. So when they got there, they went into the west wind's house. And the east wind said the lassie he had brought was the one who ought to have had the prince who lived in the castle east of the sun and west of the moon. And so she had set out to seek him, and how he had come with her, and would be glad to know if the west wind knew how to get to the castle.
Nay,
said the west wind.
So far I've never blown, but if you will, I'll go with you to our brother the south wind. For he's much stronger than either of us, and he has flapped his wings far and wide. Maybe he'll tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you to him.
Yes. She got on his back, and so they traveled to the south wind. And weren't so very long on the way, I should think. When they got there, the west wind asked him if he could tell her the way to the castle that lay east of the sun and west of the moon. For it was she who ought to have had the prince who lived there.
You don't say so. That's she, is it?
Said the south wind.
Well, I have blustered about in most places in my time, but so far have I never blown. But if you will, I'll take you to my brother the north wind. He is the oldest and strongest of the whole lot of us, and if he don't know where it is, you'll never find any one in the world to tell you. You can get on my back, and I'll carry you thither.
Yes. She got on his back, and away he went from his house at a fine rate. And this time, too, she wasn't long on her way. So when they got to the north wind's house, he was so wild and cross, cold puffs came from him a long way off.
Blast you both, what do you want?
He roared out to them ever so far off, so that it struck them with an icy shiver.
Well,
said the south wind,
you needn't be so foul-mouthed. For here I am, your brother, the south wind. And here is the lassie who ought to have had the prince, who dwells in the castle that lies east of the sun and west of the moon. And now she wants to ask you if you ever were there, and can tell her the way, for she would be so glad to find him again. Yes, I know well enough where it is,
said the north wind.
Once in my life I blew an aspen leaf thither. But I was so tired I couldn't blow a puff for ever so many days after. But if you really wish to go thither, and aren't afraid to come along with me, I'll take you on my back and see if I can blow you thither.
Yes. With all her heart, she must and would get thither if it were possible in any way. And as for fear, however madly he went, she wouldn't be at all afraid.
Very well then,
said the north wind.
But you must sleep here tonight, for we must have the whole day before us, if we're to get thither at all.
Early next morning the north wind woke her, and puffed himself up, and blew himself out, and made himself so stout and big, 'twas gruesome to look at him. And so off they went high up through the air, as if they would never stop till they got to the world's end. Down here below there was such a storm, it threw down long tracts of wood and many houses. And when it swept over the great sea, ships foundered by hundreds. So they tore on and on. No one can believe how far they went. And all the while they still went over the sea. And the north wind got more and more weary, and so out of breath he could scarce bring out a puff. And his wings drooped and drooped, till at last he sunk so low that the crests of the waves dashed over his heels.
Are you afraid?
said the north wind.
No.
She wasn't. But they weren't very far from land, and the north wind had still so much strength left in him, that he managed to throw her up on the shore under the windows of the castle, which lay east of the sun and west of the moon. But then he was so weak and worn out, he had to stay there and rest many days before he could get home again. To be continued.